Hi, I'm Mylis. My daughter came home from the ER, her tiny hand clutching Bunny, barely breathing after an asthma attack, and my mother looked me dead in the eyes and screamed, "Pay your sister's rent, or get out." When I said no, my father hit me so hard I hit the floor, blood in my mouth, my child screaming, "Mom!" while he sneered, "Maybe now you'll obey." That was the moment I realized they'd rather see me bleed than lose control over me. But what they didn't know was that they had just created the one thing they feared most, a daughter who would finally fight back. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever reached the point where family pushed you so far that you realized you'd never go back? Let me share what happened next. I drove home with Avon in the back seat, her head resting against the window, clutching her bunny, the hospital bracelet still on her tiny wrist. The rain was light but steady, tapping on the windshield in a rhythm that felt too calm for the storm I felt inside. Her asthma attack had been worse than usual, and the hours spent in the ER left me drained, but she was okay. That was all that mattered as I turned onto our street in Ohio, the familiar cracked sidewalks and wet lawns passing by in a blur. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw their car. My stomach tightened, that old, sharp fear running through me. I parked and turned to Avon, managing a tired smile. "We're home, baby," I said, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. She nodded, her big eyes tired, her bunny tucked under her chin. We stepped inside, the faint smell of damp air clinging to our coats. Before I could even close the door, Valora's voice hit me like a slap. "About time you got back," she snapped, arms folded, her perfume mixing with the scent of rain. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, aware of Avon's eyes watching everything. "Don't act like you don't know," she hissed. "Isolde's rent is due, and you're going to pay it." I took a deep breath, hanging my keys on the hook, pulling Avon's backpack off her shoulders. "I can't. I just paid for Avon's treatment, and I don't have—" "Don't start with your excuses," she cut in, her eyes sharp, flicking to Avon, who stood near the couch, clutching her bunny tighter. "Your sister is struggling, and you're living here like a queen." A laugh escaped me, bitter and low. "Living like a queen? In this duplex? I'm barely making it, Mom." Oswin stepped out from the hallway, his boots wet, leaving marks on the floor I had mopped that morning before rushing Avon to the hospital. His face was calm, too calm, as he glanced at Valora. "Maybe if you learned to respect your mother, we wouldn't have to come over like this." I could feel Avon's eyes on me, wide and uncertain, as if waiting for me to fix this like I always tried to. "I've done enough, and I can't keep paying for Isolde's choices," I said, my voice firmer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. "You selfish girl," Valora spat, stepping closer, her finger pointing inches from my face. "You think you're better than us because you have a job and your kid? You owe this family." I stepped back, raising my hands. "Don't do this here, not in front of her." "Oh, now you care about what's in front of her?" Valora shot back, rolling her eyes. That was when Oswin moved. It was fast, and I didn't even have time to react before his hand cracked across my face, sending me stumbling. I hit the floor, the sharp corner of the coffee table catching my hip, the taste of blood filling my mouth. The world tilted for a moment, the soft thud of Avon's bunny hitting the ground, followed by her scream. "Mom!" Avon's voice broke, high and terrified, cutting through the pounding in my head. I looked up, seeing Oswin's face twisted into something between disgust and satisfaction. "Maybe now you'll understand how this works," he said, wiping his hand on his jeans like I was something dirty. Avon was crying, her small hands shaking as she reached for me but stopped, looking at Valora, who just stood there, arms still crossed, watching me like I was the problem. I could taste the copper on my tongue, mixing with the tears I refused to let fall as I pushed myself up on my elbows. Avon's eyes met mine, her bunny forgotten on the floor, her cheeks wet. My heart clenched, the anger mixing with the humiliation, the fear that someone would call CPS if they heard her scream, that I'd lose her, that they would paint me as unstable. The rain outside kept tapping, soft and steady, mocking the chaos inside me. Valora's voice sliced through the quiet. "Now get up," and do the right thing for your family." I looked at Avon, her eyes begging me, pleading for me to say something, to do something. My hands were shaking as I wiped the blood from my lip, pushing myself to stand, the pain in my hips screaming, but I ignored it. Something in me cracked, and in that moment, I felt it settle deep, like a seed I didn't know I had. I wasn't going to let them do this to me, to her, again. I swallowed, tasting blood and salt, feeling the bruise already forming, and looked at them, my voice calm even as my heart thundered. They have no idea what I'm about to do. That thought followed me like a shadow as I rinsed the blood from my lip in the bathroom sink that night, the water running pink, then clear. I tucked Avon in, her bunny wrapped tight in her arms, her little face turned toward the wall as if she didn't want to see me. I watched her chest rise and fall, each breath a reminder that she was here, that she was alive, that I couldn't let this keep happening. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Oswin's hand coming down, felt the sting, heard the crack that wasn't just on my skin, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that had already been cracked too many times to count. By the time the pale gray light pushed through the blinds, I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee I didn't remember making. Avon was up, sitting on the couch with the TV on low, the colors flashing across her face as she clutched Bunny so tightly it looked like the stuffing might come out. I watched her from the kitchen, my sunglasses on even though the sky outside was dull and wet, hiding the bruise that had bloomed overnight, dark and purple, swallowing the corner of my eye. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me out of the heavy quiet that filled the room. One message, then another, until the screen was littered with words I didn't want to see. "Stop acting like you're better than us. You owe your family. Pay her rent, or we'll come back." Valora's words burned on the screen, and for a moment I thought about smashing the phone against the table, but I didn't. I couldn't. I opened the banking app, watching the numbers load slower than usual. The balance sat there, a reminder that most of it was gone, drained by hospital bills and groceries and gas, leaving me with barely enough for the rent on this place we called home. I closed my eyes, and memories flooded back. Valora's voice telling me how Isolde was the good one, how I should help because family takes care of family, even as I was the one paying for her tuition, her car repairs, the groceries she never thanked me for. I was the ATM daughter, the reliable one, the one they called when they needed something, but never the one they called just to see if I was okay. I heard a ding and looked down, a new message lighting up the screen, but it wasn't from Valora. It was from Leah, the neighbor who lived across the hall, the one with the small dog that barked at everything. The message was short. "Are you okay? You need help?" Attached was a video. My hand hovered over it, afraid to press play, but I did. Valora's voice filled the small kitchen, sharp and angry, even though the volume was low. I saw Oswin's hand swing, saw myself hit the ground, heard Avon's scream, high and broken, cutting deeper than the slap ever could. The video shook slightly. Leah must have been trying to stay hidden, but it didn't matter. The moment was clear. I felt the humiliation rise, hot and choking, as I watched myself lying there, the camera catching the moment I looked at Avon, trying to smile through blood and fear, trying to protect her when I couldn't even protect myself. I paused the video on Avon's face, her eyes wide, tears streaking down, Bunny clutched to her chest like a shield. I wanted to delete it, to pretend it didn't exist, to bury it like every other moment Valora and Oswin had made me feel small, but I didn't. I replayed it, again and again, each time seeing the fear in Avon's eyes, the confusion, the hurt, the question she didn't have to say out loud. Why? Why did you let them do that, Mom? The coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I didn't care. I set the cup down, pressing my fingers to my forehead, breathing in the quiet that was starting to feel like a lie. The fear of CPS taking Avon if someone reported what happened was real, a fear that Valora used to keep me in line. "Don't let people see your business," she always said. "They'll take your kid and leave you with nothing." And I had believed her. letting that fear chain me down while they kept taking, kept hurting, kept reminding me that I was nothing but the daughter they could drain whenever they wanted. But that fear had already cost me too much. It had cost me pieces of myself, and now it was costing Avon the safety she deserved. I looked back at the paused video, at Avon's eyes, at Bunny's torn ear peeking over her arms. I thought about all the nights I spent worrying about bills, all the mornings I got up early to take extra shifts, all the times I gave money I didn't have because I thought maybe, just maybe, they would see me, appreciate me, love me. They never did. They never would. I pressed play one last time, letting Avon's scream fill the kitchen, letting it break the silence I had let them build around me for too long. I watched until the end, until the screen went dark, and I set the phone down carefully, my hand steady, my heart pounding in a rhythm I finally understood. I stood in the kitchen, phone still in my hand, the word "never again" echoing in my head as if it had been waiting years to finally come out. Rain tapped softly on the window, a steady rhythm that matched the heaviness in my chest. The night had crawled by with barely any sleep, every creak of the house making me stiffen, waiting for them to return. They didn't, but their presence, their voices, clung to the air like a damp smell that wouldn't leave. It was Sunday now, the gray sky making the kitchen feel smaller than usual. I tried to move quietly, pulling ingredients from the cabinet, whisking eggs and milk together as I made pancakes for Avon. The sizzle of the batter on the pan filled the silence, the smell of vanilla mixing with the rain outside. I glanced over at her. She sat at the table, her little hands wrapped around Bunny, crayons scattered beside her, colors rolling off the table and onto the floor without notice. She wasn't humming like she usually did. No songs from her cartoons, no tapping of her feet, no random giggles. Just quiet, with her head bent down, brown hair falling around her face as she colored. I set a plate in front of her, sliding a small bottle of syrup beside it, trying to smile. "Pancakes, sweetie," I said, keeping my voice soft. She didn't look up, just pressed a crayon harder onto the paper. I sat across from her, resting my elbows on the table, pretending to sip my coffee that had gone cold again. She finished, sliding the paper across the table toward me without a word. My fingers hesitated before picking it up, and as I brought it closer, my breath caught. It was me, lying on the floor, a red smear near my head, Bunny just a few inches away. Avon was in the corner of the drawing, tears falling down her cheeks, scribbled in blue, her tiny hands clutching Bunny, eyes wide and dark. The room in her drawing looked just like ours, the window with the rain, the brown couch. Everything was there, down to the small rug that had been bunched up under my feet when I fell. I felt the world tilt. The crayon lines weren't just colors on paper, they were a mirror, showing me everything I had tried to hide, everything I had tried to protect her from, reflected back with the brutal honesty only a child could give. Avon's small voice broke the silence, so soft I almost missed it. "Will they hurt you again, Mom?" I swallowed hard, pressing the paper to my chest for a moment before setting it down carefully on the table. I reached across, covering her tiny hand with mine, but she didn't look up. She just kept her eyes on Bunny, rubbing its ear between her fingers. Shame and anger twisted together inside me, a storm I couldn't push away this time. The shame was heavy, making my shoulders slump, as I realized she saw me as someone who could be hurt, who couldn't stop it, who couldn't protect her. And the anger burned through that shame, a rising heat that made my jaw tighten, my teeth clench, because I had let this happen. I had let it happen over and over, telling myself it was to keep peace, to keep family, to keep her safe. My phone buzzed on the counter, jerking me from my thoughts. The screen lit up with message after message from Valora. "You're being dramatic. Family means sacrifice. Isolde needs you." Then another, "Pay her rent or we'll come back." A final one came from Oswin, simple and cold. "Family means you obey." I gripped the phone, the plastic case bending slightly under the pressure of my hand. I wanted to throw it against the wall, to watch it shatter into pieces, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the screen off and set it on the table, breathing in, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. Avon looked up at me finally, her eyes too old for her age, filled with questions she didn't know how to ask, fear she didn't deserve to carry. She clutched Bunny tighter, pressing its worn ear to her cheek, and I knew that I couldn't let this continue. Not for her, not for me. I picked up the phone again, my thumb hovering over the screen as I unlocked it. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass, the faint outline of the bruise hidden under makeup still visible if I looked hard enough. I didn't flinch this time. My fingers moved quickly, typing out words I had never allowed myself to say before, words that felt like freedom as I pressed send. "Don't come here again." It was quiet for a moment, the phone screen going dark as I set it down. Avon's drawing sat on the table, her crayon version of me lying broken on the floor, Bunny watching, Avon watching. I reached over and pulled her into my lap, holding her close, pressing my lips to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the warmth of her small body reminding me why this mattered. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. I brushed her hair back gently. "No more, baby," I whispered. I picked up her drawing, smoothing out the wrinkles with my palm, and set it on the fridge with a magnet, letting it stay there, letting it be seen. A promise, to her and to me. I looked back at her, meeting her eyes, and whispered, "It ends now." That was what I told myself, whispering it into the quiet of the living room, my breath fogging the window as I stared out at the wet street, dawn breaking cold and clear after a night of steady rain. I pulled on my scrubs, the same pair I'd worn too many shifts in a row, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, careful not to touch the fading bruise I'd hidden under makeup. Avon was still asleep, Bunny tucked under her chin, her tiny breaths even, and I let her be, closing the door softly behind me as I stepped into the morning. The hospital smelled like bleach and burnt coffee, the fluorescent lights flickering as I made my way to the break room, the floor squeaking under my shoes. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the sink as I filled a cup with stale coffee. The reflection that stared back looked like someone else, a woman with tired eyes, dark circles, and a mouth set in a line too tight to be called calm. I ran a hand across my face, pressing my fingers to the spot where Oswin's hand had landed, reminding myself that I was still here. My phone buzzed in my pocket, dragging me back. I glanced down and saw a series of notifications from the bank, each one like a tiny jab. Payments processed. Account balance low. Overdraft protection activated. I closed my eyes, thinking of the hospital bills, the medication, the rent I'd scraped together so Avon could have a stable home, so she could sleep without worry. How many times had I covered bills for Valora and Oswin, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself it was family? My phone rang as I was about to leave for rounds, and I answered it out of habit, tucking it between my shoulder and ear while I pulled on a fresh pair of gloves. The voice on the other end was polite, almost apologetic, but the words made my stomach drop. The credit union was calling to confirm the use of the home equity line. Valora and Oswin had used it to help Isolde with her business, the woman said. The emergency fund I thought was there for Avon, for me, was gone. I managed to thank her before hanging up, my hands trembling as I placed the phone down on the counter. On the drive home, I kept the windows cracked, letting the cold air bite at my face to keep me awake, to keep me from screaming. I parked, walked up the steps to our small duplex, and leaned against the door for a moment before going inside. Avon was at the table, coloring, the smell of peanut butter in the air, her hair sticking up in the back from sleep. She looked up, eyes bright, and smiled, and I forced a smile back, hiding the storm that was rolling through me. Later, I ran out to grab a few groceries, needing milk and bread, the essentials that always seemed to run out faster than I could buy them. The store was busy, carts rattling against each other, people moving too fast, the buzz of conversation making it hard to think. That's when I saw her. Isolde. She was near the makeup aisle, laughing into her phone, tossing a bottle of expensive serum into her cart without checking the price. She was dressed in a new coat, her nails freshly done, hair styled in loose curls that caught the light. I stood there for a moment, frozen, watching her giggle as she flipped her hair, saying, "Yeah, the spa was amazing. I might go back next week." She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she looked me up and down, her eyes sliding over me like I was something she didn't want to deal with. "How can you afford all this?" I heard myself say, my voice calm but shaking underneath. "You know what's happening to me. To Avon." She rolled her eyes, pulling her cart back slightly. "Maybe if you weren't so bitter, they'd love you too," she said, turning her back on me as if I were nothing, her phone already back to her ear, laughing again as she walked away. I stood there for a long moment, gripping the edge of the cart so hard my knuckles turned white, her words sinking into me like ice. The family martyr. That's what she called me once. A joke she made to Valora when she thought I couldn't hear, laughing about how I always paid, how I always showed up, how I was the one they could drain dry because I was too soft to say no. Yay. At home, I sat on the couch, groceries still in their bags on the floor, the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Avon was coloring again, glancing up at me every now and then, her eyes searching mine, trying to read the tension I couldn't hide anymore. She clutched Bunny closer, the way she did when she was scared, and I forced myself to breathe, to keep the tears from coming. I replayed Isolde's words in my head, over and over, the way she smirked, the way she dismissed me like I was nothing, like I had always been nothing. I thought about the equity, about the money I thought was there to protect Avon, and how it was gone, spent on spa treatments and shopping trips, on a business Isolde would abandon the moment it wasn't fun anymore. They don't love me, they love what I do for them. The thought came to me clear and sharp, cutting through the fog of hurt and shame. I looked at Avon, at the way she was trying to hide her fear, trying to be brave because she thought that's what I needed from her. She deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. I stood, moving to the window, looking out at the street, the cold light of the day stretching across the pavement, glinting off the puddles left by the rain. I pressed my hand to the glass, feeling the chill seep into my skin, grounding me. "They'll see who I really am," I whispered, the words steady, not a promise, but a fact. I kept telling myself that as I rinsed out Avon's lunchbox in the sink, the water running warm over my hands, steam curling up into the cold air of the kitchen. It was Wednesday, the kind of gray afternoon that made you want to crawl under blankets and forget the world, but there was no forgetting what had happened or what was coming next. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 as I folded the last of Avon's laundry, placing her small shirts in neat stacks, her favorite socks with the pink stripes on top. The bus would be dropping her off any minute. I stood by the window, watching the street, the bare branches of the trees swaying in a restless breeze, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. Avon stepped off the bus, her backpack too big on her small shoulders, Bunny tucked under one arm, her eyes scanning the street until they found me. She walked quickly, almost running, and I opened the door before she could knock, pulling her into my arms as she stepped inside. "Mom," she whispered, her voice tight, "are they coming back?" I knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, meeting her eyes. "No one's coming in here unless I say so. You're safe, honey." She nodded, but she held on to Bunny like it was the only thing keeping her upright, her fingers gripping the worn fabric, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting shadows to jump out. I made her a snack, peanut butter on crackers, and we sat together at the table, the TV on low in the background with a cartoon she didn't really watch. She picked at the crackers, glancing at me, her silence heavier than any words she could have spoken. Around 5, I realized we were out of milk and a few other things. I didn't want to leave her alone, but the store was only 5 minutes away, and she promised to stay inside, the door locked, the phone nearby. I kissed her forehead before leaving, my steps quick as I crossed the small parking lot to my car. The store was crowded, as usual, people moving slowly in the aisles, carts squeaking, the hum of conversation filling the air. I grabbed what we needed, checking out quickly, and hurried back, the grocery bags rustling as I climbed the steps to our front door. The door was open. For a moment, I froze, the bag slipping slightly in my grip, my heart slamming in my chest. I pushed the door open with my foot, stepping inside, calling out, "Avon?" I heard her before I saw her, a small cry from behind the couch. I set the bags down, my eyes adjusting to the dim light of the living room. Valora was standing by the kitchen counter, my jewelry box open, her hands rifling through it. Oswin was near the hallway, blocking the path to the bedrooms, his arms crossed, a smirk on his face. "We're just taking what's ours since you won't help," Valora said without looking at me, dropping one of my bracelets into her purse. "Mom, please," I said, my voice low, steady. "Put that down. You can't just come in here." She glanced up, her eyes cold. "Don't talk to me like that. We gave you everything, and you can't even help your own sister." I moved to step forward, but Oswin blocked me, his shoulders broad, his eyes daring me to try to get past him. "You need to leave. Now," I said, louder this time. Valora suddenly gasped, her hand going to her chest, her body sagging as she leaned against the counter. "You're killing me, Melis," she moaned, her voice breaking. I froze, instinct kicking in, stepping toward her, reaching out, but I caught the way her eyes flickered open, checking if I was panicking, if I would fall for the act. I pulled my hand back, letting it drop to my side, my jaw tightening. Outside, I saw neighbors gathering, their faces pressed against their windows, a few stepping onto their porches, whispering, pointing. Valora wailed louder, sinking to the floor, clutching her chest, Oswin shouting, "She's abusing her own sick mother." I felt the heat rise in my face, the humiliation sharp, slicing through me as I realized how it must look from the outside. A daughter standing over her mother who was now sobbing on the floor, a man yelling about abuse while neighbors shook their heads, pity and judgment in their eyes. Behind me, I heard Avon's cry, high and scared, "Stop!" She stood there, her small body shaking, Bunny clutched to her chest, tears streaking down her cheeks. I turned to her, reaching out, but she flinched back, and something inside me broke. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her, about what kind of world she would grow up believing in if I let this continue. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing, and Valora's sobs turned into sudden protests when they tried to check her vitals. She pushed them away, insisting she didn't need to go, glaring at me as if I were the cause of all her pain. Oswin gave me a look, one that said, "This isn't over," as he helped Valora up, her sobs turning to sniffles as she clung to him, casting one last look over her shoulder as they left. When the door finally closed and the sirens faded, I stood in the middle of the room, the groceries still on the floor, Avon's cries the only sound in the silence. I walked over to her, kneeling down, pulling her into my arms. "I'm so sorry, baby," I whispered into her hair. "So sorry you had to see that." She didn't answer, just held on to me, her small body shaking as I rocked her gently, my own tears finally slipping down my cheeks. I looked up, the room blurry through my tears, seeing the mess they left behind, the drawers open, the jewelry scattered, the feeling of violation heavy in the air. "They've crossed the line," I whispered, my voice steady, a promise more than a statement. I kept hearing those words in my head as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while dawn slowly peeled away the darkness. Avon was curled beside me, her small hand gripping my arm even in sleep. Bunny pressed against her chest like a silent guard. Her breath was steady, but every so often she would whimper, and my heart would crack open again. I had spent too many nights like this, frozen by fear, telling myself I was keeping the peace. But peace built on fear wasn't peace. It was a leash, and they had held it tight around my neck for too long. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Avon, and padded into the kitchen. The floor was cold under my feet, the air sharp in my lungs. I wrapped a sweater around me, poured myself a cup of coffee, and opened my phone. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced them to steady. This time, I wouldn't let fear shake me. I opened the messages from Valora, the ones that said, "Pay up or we'll come back." The ones that called me selfish and heartless. The ones that made me question my worth as a daughter. Screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. Then the neighbor's video. The one they had sent me asking, "Are you okay?" The video where Oswin's hand cracked across my face, where Avon's screams split the air, where Valora stood behind him, smirking. I downloaded it, saving it to a secure folder. I opened my camera, scrolling back to photos I had taken quietly over the years. Bruises I had hidden under makeup, finger-shaped marks on my arms. A split lip from when Oswin had accidentally elbowed me while reaching for a plate. I hadn't planned to keep them, but something deep inside me had whispered, "Save it." Now I knew why. I recorded my own voice, steady and calm, retelling what they had said when demanding money, how they had walked into my home, taken what they wanted, and mocked me for being the ATM daughter. I labeled everything carefully, uploading it to a folder named Safety for Avon. I repeated the name in my head like a mantra. This wasn't just for me anymore. By the time the sun had fully risen, painting the sky in a cold, pale blue, I was ready. I made breakfast for Avon, pancakes the way she liked them, with a little swirl of chocolate chips that made her smile even on hard days. She ate quietly, swinging her legs under the table, glancing up at me with those wide eyes that held too much fear for someone so small. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Are we safe now?" I knelt in front of her, brushing her hair back, looking into her eyes. "We will be, baby. I promise." Later that morning, I dropped Avon off at school, kissing her forehead as she clung to me for a moment longer than usual. She looked back at me as she walked inside, her backpack bouncing with each step, Bunny's ear sticking out of the zipper. I drove straight to the county records office, parking in the small lot beside the building. The air was crisp, biting at my cheeks as I walked in, papers tucked under my arm, the determination in my chest heavier than any fear I had carried before. Inside, the clerk was polite, tapping at her keyboard as I requested the records for the house I grew up in. The house Valora and Oswin were living in without paying a dime, telling everyone they were helping me when the truth was the opposite. "Yes," the clerk said, turning the screen toward me. "This property is under your LLC. No rent has been recorded for over 8 months." I stared at the screen, letting the reality sink in, a cold wave of clarity washing over me. They were living under my roof while trying to ruin me, using my own kindness as a weapon against me. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, letting the warmth from the heater fill the space. I pulled out my phone and called the lawyer I had spoken to once before when I thought about leaving everything behind. His voice was calm, steady, as he explained the process of filing for a restraining order and eviction. "You have every legal right, Melis," he said, "and you're not alone." When I returned home, the afternoon light was already fading, the sky turning a soft gray. I picked up Avon from school, and we drove home in silence, the radio playing quietly in the background. She reached over, taking my hand, her small fingers wrapping around mine, and I squeezed back, letting her know I was here, that I would not fail her again. That evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, Avon sat at the table with her crayons, drawing quietly. I glanced over and she held up her paper, a picture of a small house, 2 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. "This is us, Mom," she said, her voice small but clear. "We're safe here." I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I took the drawing, pressing it to my chest. She needed me to fight, to protect the little world we had left. That night, after Avon was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, the paperwork spread out in front of me. I signed the forms for the restraining order, the eviction notices ready to serve. I backed up every file again, double-checking everything, ensuring that nothing would be lost. I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, looking into my own eyes, the dark circles under them a reminder of every sleepless night, every moment I had let fear silence me. "It's my turn now," I whispered to my reflection. I didn't sleep the night before, but I wasn't tired. I was clear. Every moment Valora's screams echoed in my mind, every threat, every slap they thought would keep me down, it all sharpened into one thought. It's my turn now. I got Avon ready for school in silence that morning, helping her zip up her coat while she clutched Bunny, eyes searching mine for something I could finally give her. Certainty. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her, and watched her walk through the school doors, her small backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Driving to the courthouse, the sky was cold and clear, winter sun hitting the frost on the grass like a warning that the world was still harsh but clean. I parked and walked inside with my folder, each step steady, each breath reminding me I was alive and free to make choices. I signed the papers for the restraining order, handed them to the clerk, and felt the air shift inside me. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic, but it felt like crossing an invisible line I'd drawn around myself for too long. Back in the car, I pulled out my phone and called the deputy assigned to assist me. We arranged to meet at the house, and I drove there with my palms warm on the steering wheel, no shaking this time. They were sitting on the porch when I arrived, Valora in her oversized coat, hair pinned up too tight, Oswin next to her, looking like he was waiting for a fight. The deputy pulled in behind me, stepping out with calm authority, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I stepped forward, papers in hand, voice steady. "You've been served," I said, placing the eviction notice into Oswin's hand. His fingers closed around it, eyes narrowing. Valora stood up so quickly the chair rattled, her voice slicing the cold air. "You're throwing us out? Your own parents? What kind of daughter does that?" I took a breath, feeling the ground solid under me. A daughter who's done being your ATM, a mother who's protecting her child. Neighbors gathered, pulled out by the shouting, curious faces peeking from porches, some stepping onto lawns. Valora's voice rose, shrill and trembling. "She's leaving us on the street? After all we did for her, she's turning her back on her family." Oswin stepped forward, towering over me, his breath visible in the cold air. "You think you've won, Maylis. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back." I met his stare, felt the heat of rage I used to swallow boil inside me, but I didn't let it control me this time. "No, Oswin, I won't." Valora started crying, real tears this time, but they weren't for me or Avon. They were for the life they were losing, the control slipping from their hands. She shouted, "You're a disgrace, a Judas!" I heard Avon's voice behind me, small but strong from the back seat of the car. "Mom?" I turned, saw her standing with Bunny, eyes wide but calm, watching me. I knelt down, holding her gaze. "It's okay, baby. We're okay." Oswin scoffed, crumpling the eviction notice in his hand. "You're making a mistake you can't take back." I stood, turning to face him fully. "No. This is the one thing I will never regret." Valora tried to pull at my arm, but the deputy stepped forward, calmly instructing them to leave the property by the date listed or face legal consequences. Her hand dropped, shaking. As I walked back to the car, Valora's voice rang out, desperate and ugly. "You'll regret this, you hear me? You'll regret this, Maylis." I paused at the car door, looking back at her, seeing her for what she was, a frightened woman who had hurt others to hide her fear. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the cold morning like a blade. "No, you will." I helped Avon into the car, buckling her in as she looked at me, studying my face. She didn't look scared, she looked proud. And for the first time in too many years, I let myself feel proud too. We drove away slowly, leaving them behind on that porch, their voices getting smaller as the car moved down the street. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from extended family, church acquaintances, some siding with Valora, others asking what happened. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I stopped the car by the park, letting Avon run with Bunny across the grass, her laughter rising into the clear air. I scrolled through the messages, calmly attaching copies of the evidence when needed, stating the facts without fear, without begging to be understood. Let them believe what they wanted. The truth was on my side now, and I was done hiding it. When we returned home, the duplex felt warmer than it ever had. Avon curled up on the couch, Bunny beside her, falling asleep to the sound of her favorite cartoons. I sat nearby, the eviction copies and restraining order paperwork neatly filed, the lawyer on standby for the next steps. I looked at the window, the winter light streaming through, catching in the small drawing Avon had made of us taped to the glass, two figures holding hands under a smiling sun. For the first time in a long time, I believed in that sun. When I closed my eyes the night before eviction day, I didn't dream. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was the quiet certainty that the next morning, everything would finally change. Avon was quiet as we drove, the heater humming softly against the cold creeping in from the gray sky. She held Bunny close to her chest, tracing the seam with her finger, whispering, "We're really doing it, huh, Mom?" I reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Yes, baby, we are." We pulled up in front of the house that morning, the place I used to think of as home, now littered with garbage bags, broken lamps, Valora's cracked patio swing tilting on the lawn. The wind rustled the fallen leaves, pushing them against the tires of our car in soft hisses that felt like the house itself, sighing in relief. Valora was on the porch, pacing, hair disheveled, yelling into her phone, "She's here now! She's really going through with it!" Oswin was near the front steps, pointing at the movers, shouting about what was theirs and what they deserved to keep. Every so often he shot me a glare, like he was daring me to come closer. Avon stayed in the car, eyes wide, but when I looked at her, she nodded once. She understood that this was the moment we had been waiting for, whether we were ready or not. I walked up the path, the deputy beside me, clipboard in hand, calm and unbothered by Valora's screeching. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, but my hands didn't shake. Valora spotted me and pointed, her voice cracking. "You're abandoning your family. You'll regret this when we're gone." I kept my eyes on her, voice steady. "The only thing I regret is letting you stay this long." Oswin moved closer, close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on his breath, his hand twitching as if to grab my arm. I didn't step back. "Try it," I said quietly, "and you'll see how fast the police arrive." He froze, eyes narrowing, but he stepped back, and that was the moment I saw it. He knew he'd lost his power over me. Valora's face twisted, tears spilling as she shouted to the neighbors gathering at the edges of their driveways, "She's throwing us out into the street, after all we've done for her." The deputy cleared his throat, handing the final confirmation to me. "Ma'am, the property is officially back under your control." Valora screamed, a sound that split the cold air, clutching her chest as if she could force sympathy from the people watching. But no one moved. No one came to comfort her. Avon stepped out of the car then, Bunny in hand, her small boots crunching on the gravel. She stopped beside me, looking at Valora and Oswin, her voice soft but cutting through the chaos. "You shouldn't have hurt my mom." For a second, everything was silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Valora opened her mouth, ready to argue, to lie, to plead, but nothing came out. Her hands dropped to her sides, and for the first time, I saw her as she was, not as the mother I had tried to earn love from, but as a woman who had built her power on fear and guilt. Oswin's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him as he realized there was nothing left to threaten me with. The movers carried out the last of their boxes, placing them on the patchy lawn. Valora and Oswin stood beside their things, clutching what they could, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. I turned to Avon, kneeling to her level, brushing her cheek with my thumb. "We're free," I told her. She blinked, tears welling, but she smiled. "Bunny's not scared anymore, Mommy." I swallowed hard, pressing my forehead against hers. Neither am I. As we walked back to the car, Valora's voice cracked behind us, one last desperate attempt to hold on to the controls slipping through her fingers. "You'll regret this. You'll regret turning your back on your family." I paused, turning to look at her one last time, the cold wind lifting strands of hair around my face. My voice was calm, final. "No, you will." Avon slipped her hand into mine, her small fingers warm and steady, and together we turned away, walking toward the car, leaving behind the pieces of a life I no longer needed to hold. After Avon whispered that Bunny wasn't scared anymore, I turned the key in the ignition, letting the heater fill the car as we pulled away from the house that had once been my parents'. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. We drove in silence for a while, the cold air outside sharpening the newness of what we'd just done, of who we were becoming. A few weeks later, we moved into a small rental a few streets away. It wasn't fancy, but the moment we walked in, the soft creak of the wooden floors and the light streaming through the windows felt like a promise. Out front, lavender bushes lined the walkway, their scent sweetening the air even when the breeze was cold. That morning, early spring sunshine fell across the living room, catching the edges of Avon's hair as she sat on the floor, her crayons spread around her. She hummed quietly, Bunny tucked under her arm as she colored with careful strokes, pausing every so often to study the lines she made. I sat in a thrifted armchair near the window, a cup of coffee warming my hands. The lavender swayed outside, the breeze making them dance softly, and I thought about how many mornings I had spent forcing myself to get up, to pretend everything was fine, swallowing fear like it was part of breakfast. I realized, sitting there watching Avon, that I hadn't done that once since we moved in. Avon finished her drawing and patted over, holding it up with a shy smile. "Look, Mommy." It was a small house, 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a big, round sun. In the corner was Bunny, a small heart drawn above her head. "Bunny's happy now, Mommy," Avon said. I felt tears sting but didn't let them fall. "Me too, baby," I whispered, pulling her into my lap, letting her giggle as I pressed a kiss to her forehead. Later, I checked my phone, seeing a few messages from neighbors, some saying they were proud of me, others quietly offering help if we needed anything. A few distant relatives reached out too, saying they had seen what had really happened, how Valora and Oswin had twisted everything. Some still didn't understand, and that was okay. I wasn't living for their approval anymore. I had heard from someone that Valora and Oswin were now in a cramped apartment above a shuttered nail salon, arguing with each other about bills, calling Isolde for help, only to have her ignore them. I didn't feel triumph, only a quiet sense of closure. I didn't need them to suffer, but I needed them to be away from us, and now they were. Avon had started painting classes at the community center, coming home with smudges of color on her hands, her eyes bright as she told me about her new friends. At night she slept deeply, her breaths steady, her small body curled around Bunny, no longer jerking awake in fear. I began attending therapy, learning how to name the guilt I had carried for too long and letting it go, bit by bit. It was slow work, but each session felt like lifting a weight from my chest. I was learning that love was not the same as obligation, that family did not mean I owed them everything. One Saturday morning, Avon and I sat on the small porch, the lavender bushes shifting in the breeze. She was brushing Bunny's ears, her eyes focused, while I sipped tea and felt the warmth of the cup seep into my hands. "Mommy?" she said, looking up. "We're really safe now, right?" I met her gaze, the weight of her question settling in me, and I nodded. "Yes, honey, we're safe." She smiled, returning to Bunny, humming a little tune under her breath. The sky was pale blue, streaked with soft lavender clouds that reminded me of the bushes lining our walkway, of the peace we were building with every sunrise. I stood, breathing in the cool morning air, letting the scent of lavender fill me with a calm I hadn't known I could have. Avon looked up, watching me, and I saw her smile widen. "We don't live in fear anymore," I whispered, more to myself than to her. But she heard me, and she nodded, her small face solemn with understanding. As we stepped inside to start the day, closing the door gently behind us, I knew this was our beginning. Not perfect, not without challenges, but ours, free and finally, enough.